You know what? In 78 years, I've never seen anything like last night. I've watched actors crack, directors lose it completely. But that national address, that was something far more dangerous. Picture this. You expect dignity, maybe reassurance. Instead, what walks into frame looks like someone who hasn't slept for days. Wild hair, twitchy energy, and eyes that weren't focused on anything real. Within 60 seconds, I knew we were in trouble. Real trouble. See, I grew up watching presidents on television. Kennedy during Cuba, steady as granite. Reagan after Challenger, finding exactly the right words. Even Nixon understood the weight of that office. But this was watching someone completely disconnect from reality while the world watched. The first red flag hit 4 minutes in. He was supposed to read from that teleprompter, but his eyes never went to it. Instead, he started jabbing his finger at the camera like he was arguing with his reflection. That's when I realized something chilling. He wasn't talking to America. He was talking to the voices in his head. You want to know when I knew this was disaster? When he started interrupting himself mid-sentence. He'd talk about the economy, then jump to conspiracy theories, then back to different economic numbers, then attack reporters by name, like watching someone lose a fight with their own thoughts. But here's what really got to me. The people around him, his staff, his advisors, they were probably standing just outside that camera frame, and you could feel their panic through the screen. You could sense them thinking, how do we stop this? How do we get him to just read the damn speech? But they couldn't stop it. They were trapped, watching their boss self-destruct on live television. The worst part wasn't the rambling. Politicians ramble. The worst part was watching him believe his own lies. He quoted crime statistics so backwards from reality, so fabricated, that I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was terrifying. When the president can't tell the difference between what's real and what he wants to be real, we're all in danger. And his body language, Jesus. He was leaning so far forward I thought he might fall into the camera. His face kept getting redder, the veins in his neck bulging like he was lifting weights. His hands were moving around like he was conducting some invisible, angry orchestra that only he could hear. This wasn't presidential, this was unhinged. I kept thinking about our allies watching this unfold, reports being written back to capitals worldwide. The American president appears to have lost control. That's not embarrassing. That's dangerous. An invitation for every enemy to test us. Halfway through this disaster, something even worse happened. He started settling personal scores on live television, naming judges who ruled against him, reporters who fact-checked him, politicians who criticized him. He was using a national address like it was his personal revenge platform, and all I could think was, this is supposed to be about the country. This is supposed to be about leadership. What the hell is this? But the most chilling moment when his voice started cracking, not with emotion, but with pure rage. You could see him losing the battle with his own anger, right there on camera, the mask slipping completely. And for one terrifying second, you could see what he really is underneath, a man completely out of control. The instant those cameras cut off, the damage control started. Within minutes, his staff was releasing statements, trying to explain what he really meant, trying to walk back the worst parts, trying to spin this train wreck into something resembling competence. But you can't unring that bell. You can't take back what the whole world just witnessed. And his own party, Republicans who have defended him through everything, were scrambling for ways to explain this away. The best they could manage was calling it passionate. Passionate, that's what we're calling complete mental breakdowns now. Here's what really makes me angry. There are real problems facing real people right now. Families struggling, communities dealing with crises, Americans who need their government to work. Instead of solutions or basic competence, we got 25 minutes of personal grievances and conspiracy theories. That's not just unpresidential. That's a betrayal of everyone counting on their leaders to actually lead. But the scariest part? His supporters will probably find a way to defend this. They'll say he was fighting for them or telling it like it is. They'll turn this disaster into proof of how unfairly he's treated, because that's what happens when you're dealing with people who've lost touch with objective reality right alongside their leader. Meanwhile, The rest of us watched a preview of what happens when someone completely unfit for the job gets the job anyway. When pressure reveals who someone really is, and what gets revealed is someone who can't handle the basic responsibilities of leadership. So this wasn't just a bad speech, this was a warning. This was democracy's check engine light flashing red, telling us we've got serious problems under the hood. Because if he can't handle giving a simple address without falling apart, how's he going to handle a real crisis? How's he going to respond when we need steady leadership instead of paranoid rambling? The answer is he won't. He'll collapse just like he collapsed last night. And that puts all of us at risk. We can't just hope this gets better on its own. We can't assume someone else will fix this. Because last night proved that we're on our own, that we can't count on the guy in charge to do his job when it matters most. So it's up to us, every American who still believes in competence, dignity, and basic professionalism. We've got to do better. We've got to demand better. Because if we accept this as normal, if we just shrug and move on, then we're all complicit in what comes next. And trust me, you don't want to see what comes next. But let me tell you something else eating at me. I've played characters cracking under pressure, guys losing their grip on reality. There's always signs, little tells that show someone's about to break down. I saw every single one of those signs last night. The shallow breathing when he talked about legal troubles. How his left hand twitched whenever he mentioned investigation. The micro expressions when he thought the camera wasn't focused on him. His mask didn't just slip last night, it shattered into 1,000 pieces. And here's what really scares me. This wasn't his first breakdown. This was just the first one we watched in real time. You think this was isolated? This has been building for months. I remember my old neighborhood in New York, watching guys who ran things, guys who thought they were untouchable. When pressure got too much, they made mistakes, big mistakes. But those guys ran a street corner. This guy's running the country. You want to know what broke my heart? Thinking about kids who might have been watching, young Americans who are supposed to look up to the presidency, who should see that office as something noble. Instead, they watched a grown man have a temper tantrum on the world's biggest stage. What are we teaching them? That this is normal? That this is acceptable behavior from someone in a position of power and responsibility? That when things don't go your way, you just point fingers and blame everyone else? I grew up in an era where the presidency meant something, where even if you disagreed with the guy's policies, you respected the office. You respected the dignity that came with it. You knew that whoever sat behind that desk understood they were representing something bigger than themselves. But what we saw last night wasn't someone representing America. It was someone representing only himself. His grievances, his paranoia, his complete inability to handle criticism or accountability, and the international implications, staggering. You think Putin wasn't watching? Xi Jinping? Every dictator saw this as proof that American democracy is weak, our leader unstable, their moment to make moves while we're distracted. I guarantee within hours of that address ending, emergency meetings started in capitals worldwide. Not to help us, but to figure out how to take advantage of our weakness. Because that's what weakness looks like on the world stage. Not just policy disagreements or political opposition, actual visible mental instability from the person who's supposed to be leading the free world. You know what haunts me most about this whole thing? The moment when he started talking about enemies of the state, the way his voice changed when he said it, the look in his eyes. I've seen that look before in movies. Playing characters who were about to do terrible things, characters who had convinced themselves that violence was justified because everyone was against them. That's not acting anymore, that's real life, and it's terrifying. But here's what gives me hope, what keeps me from completely giving up on this country. The reaction from ordinary Americans, not the politicians, not the pundits, not the people who get paid to spin everything. I'm talking about regular people, people from all walks of life, all political backgrounds, who watched that address and said, this isn't right, this isn't who we are. Because deep down, Americans know what leadership looks like. We know the difference between strength and weakness, between confidence and paranoia, between someone who can handle the job and someone who's completely overwhelmed by it. We've seen real presidents before. We know what they sound like, how they carry themselves, how they rise to the moment when the moment demands it, And what we saw last night was the opposite of all of that. So here's my message to everyone who's feeling scared or angry or helpless after watching that disaster unfold. You're not powerless, you're not alone, and you're not crazy for thinking that what you witnessed was completely unacceptable. The America I believe in, the America I've spent my whole life being proud to be part of, is better than this. We're better than this. And we have the power to prove it, to demand better, to insist that the people we put in positions of leadership actually know how to lead. That starts with all of us refusing to normalize what we saw last night, refusing to accept it as just another day in politics, refusing to let our standards drop so low that a complete mental breakdown on live television becomes something we just shrug off and move on from. Because if we do that, if we accept this as normal, then we're telling the world that America has given up on itself, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let that happen on my watch.